Carlos Castaneda's A Separate Reality, Part 2, The Task of Seeing. Don Juan was not at his house when I arrived there at midday on November 8th, 1968. I had no idea where to look for him, so I sat and waited. For some unknown reason, I knew he would soon be home. A short while later, Don Juan walked into his house. He nodded at me. We exchanged greetings. He seemed to be tired and lay down on his mat. He yawned a couple of times. The idea of seeing had become an obsession with me, and I had made up my mind to use his hallucinogenic smoking mixture again. It had been a terribly difficult decision to make, so I still wanted to argue the point a bit further. I want to learn to see, Don Juan, I said bluntly, but I really don't want to take anything. I don't want to smoke your mixture. Do you think there is any chance I could learn to see without it? He sat up, stared at me for a moment, and lay down again. No, he said, you will have to use the smoke. But you said I was on the verge of seeing with Don Gennaro. I meant that something in you was glowing as though you were really aware of Gennaro's doings. But you were just looking. Obviously, there is something in you that resembles seeing, but it isn't. You're plugged up, and only the smoke can help you. Why does one have to smoke? Why can't one simply learn to see by oneself? I have a very earnest desire. Isn't that enough? No, it's not enough. Seeing is not so simple, and only the smoke can give you the speed you need to catch a glimpse of that fleeting world. Otherwise, you will only look. What do you mean by a fleeting world? The world, when you see, is not as you think it is now. It is rather a fleeting world that moves and changes. One may perhaps learn to apprehend that fleeting world by oneself, but it wouldn't do any good because the body decays with the stress. With the smoke, on the other hand, one never suffers from exhaustion. The smoke gives you the necessary speed to grasp the fleeting movement of the world, and at the same time it keeps the body and its strength intact. All right, I said dramatically, I don't want to beat around the bush any longer. I'll smoke. He laughed at my display of histrionics. Cut it out, he said. You always hook on to the wrong thing. Now you think that just deciding to let the smoke guide you is going to make you see. There's more to it. There is always much more to anything. He became serious for a moment. I've been very careful with you, and my acts have been deliberate, he said, because it is Mescalito's desire that you understand my knowledge. But I know that I won't have time to teach you all that I want. I will only have time to put you on the road and trust that you will seek in the same fashion I did. I must admit that you are more indolent and more stubborn than I. You have other views, though, and the direction that your life will take is something I cannot foresee. His deliberate tone of voice, something in his attitude summoned up an old feeling in me, a mixture of fear, loneliness, and expectation. We'll soon know where you stand, he said cryptically. He did not say anything else. After a while, we went outside the house. I followed him and stood in front of him, not knowing whether to sit down or to unload some packages I had brought for him. Would it be dangerous, I asked, just to say something? Everything is dangerous, he said. Don Juan did not seem to be inclined to tell me anything else. He gathered some small bundles that were piled in a corner and put them inside a carrying net. I did not offer to help him because I knew that if he had wished me my help, he would have asked. Then he lay down on his straw mat. He told me to relax and rest. I lay down on my mat and tried to sleep, but I was not tired. The night before I had stopped at a motel and slept until noon, knowing that I had only a 3-hour drive to Don Juan's place. He was not sleeping either. Although his eyes were closed, I noticed an almost imperceptible rhythmical movement of his head. The thought occurred to me that he was perhaps chanting to himself. Let's eat something, Don Juan said suddenly. and his voice made me jump. "You're going to need all your energy. You should be in good shape." He made some soup, but I wasn't hungry. The next day, November 9th, Don Juan let me eat only a morsel of food and told me to rest. I lay around all morning and I could not relax. I had no idea what Don Juan had in mind, but worst of all, I was not certain what I had in mind myself. We were sitting under his ramada around 3 p.m. I was very hungry. I had suggested various times that we should eat, but he had refused. "You haven't prepared your mixture for 3 years," he said suddenly. "You'll have to smoke my mixture. So let's say that I have collected it for you. You will need only a bit of it. I will fill the bowl once. You will smoke all of it and then rest. Then the keeper of the other world will come. You will do nothing but observe it. Observe how it moves, observe everything it does. Your life may depend on how well you watch." Don Juan had dropped his instructions so abruptly that I did not know what to say or even what to think. I mumbled incoherently for a moment. I could not organize my thoughts. Finally, I asked the first clear thing that came to my mind. Who is this guardian?" Don Juan flatly refused to involve himself in conversations, but I was too nervous to stop talking, and I insisted desperately that he tell me about this guardian. "You will see it," he said casually. "It guards the other world." "What world? The world of the dead?" "It's not the world of the dead or the world of anything. It's just another world. There's no use telling you about it. See it for yourself." With that, Don Juan went inside the house. I followed him into his room. Wait, Don Juan. What are you going to do?" He did not answer. He took his pipe out of a bundle and sat down on a straw mat in the center of the room, looking at me inquisitively. He seemed to be waiting for my consent. "You're a fool," he said softly. "You're not afraid. You just say you're afraid." He shook his head slowly from side to side. Then he took the little bag with the smoking mixture and filled the pipe bowl. "I am afraid, Don Juan. I am really afraid. No, it's not fear." I desperately tried to gain time and began a long discussion about the nature of my feelings. I sincerely maintained that I was afraid, but he pointed out that I was not panting, nor was my heart beating faster than usual. I thought for a while about what he had said. He was wrong. I did have many of the physical changes ordinarily associated with fear, and I was desperate. A sense of impending doom permeated everything around me. My stomach was upset, and I was sure I was pale. My hands were sweating profusely, and I really thought I was not. And yet I really thought I was not afraid. I did not have the feeling of fear I had been accustomed to throughout my life. The fear which is always idiosyncratically mine was not there. I was talking as I paced up and down the room in front of Don Juan, who was still sitting on his mat, holding his pipe and looking at me inquisitively. And upon considering the matter, I arrived at the conclusion that what I felt instead of my usual fear was a profound sense of displeasure, a discomfort at the mere thought of the confusion created by the intake of the hallucinogenic plants. Don Juan stared at me for an instant. Then he looked past me, squinting as if he were struggling to detect something in the distance. I kept walking back and forth in front of him until he forcefully told me to sit down and relax. We sat quietly for a few minutes. "You don't want to lose your clarity, do you?" he said abruptly. "That's right, Don Juan," I said. He laughed with apparent delight. "Clarity, the second enemy of a man of knowledge, has loomed upon you. You're not afraid," he said reassuringly, "but now you hate to lose your clarity. Since you're a fool, you call that fear." He chuckled. "Get me some charcoals," he ordered. His tone was kind and reassuring. I got up and automatically went to the back of the house and gathered some small pieces of burning charcoal from the fire and put them on top of a small stone slab and returned to the room. "Come out here to the porch," Don Juan called softly from outside. He placed the straw mat on the spot where I usually sit. I put the charcoals next to him, and he blew on them to activate the fire. I was about to sit down, but he stopped and told me to sit on the right edge of the mat. He then put a piece of charcoal in the pipe and handed it to me. I took it. I was amazed at the silent forcefulness with which Don Juan had stared me. I could not think of anything to say. I had no more arguments. I was convinced that I was not afraid, but only willing to lose my clarity. Puff, puff, he ordered me gently. Just one bowl this time. I sucked on the pipe and heard the chirping of the mixture catching on fire. I felt an instantaneous coat of ice inside my mouth and my nose. I took another puff, and the coating extended to my chest. When I had taken the last puff, I felt that the entire inside of my body was coated with a peculiar sensation of cold warmth. Don Juan took the pipe away from me and tapped the bowl on his palm to loosen the residue. Then, as he had always done, he put his fingers with saliva. He wet his fingers with saliva and rubbed it inside the bowl. My body was numb, but I could move. I changed position to sit more comfortably. "What's going to happen?" I asked. I had some difficulty vocalizing. Don Juan very carefully put his pipe inside his sheath, rolled it up in a long piece of cloth. Then he sat up straight facing me. I felt dizzy. My eyes were closing involuntarily. Don Juan shook me vigorously and ordered me to stay awake. He said I knew very well that if I fell asleep I would die. That jolted me. It occurred to me that Don Juan was probably just saying that to keep me awake. But on the other hand, it also occurred to me that he might be right. I had opened my eyes as wide as I could, and that made Don Juan laugh. He said that I had to wait for a while and keep my eyes open all the time, and that at a given moment I would be able to see the guardian of the other world. I felt a very annoying heat all over my body. I tried to change positions, but I could not move any more. I wanted to talk to Don Juan. The words seemed to be so deep inside me that I could not bring them out. Then I tumbled on my left side and found myself looking at Don Juan from the floor. He leaned over and ordered me in a whisper not to look at him, but to stare fixedly at a point on my mat, which was directly in front of my eyes. He said that I had to look with one eye, my left eye, and that sooner or later I would see the guardian. I fixed my stare on the spot he had pointed to, but I did not see anything. At a certain moment, however, I noticed a gnat flying in front of my eyes. It landed on the mat. I followed its movement. It came very close to me, so close that my visual perception blurred. Then all of a sudden, I felt as if I had stood up. It was a very puzzling sensation that deserved some pondering, but there was no time for that. I had the total sensation that I was looking straight onward from my usual eye level, and what I saw shook up the last fiber of my being. There was no other way to describe the emotional jolt I experienced. Right there facing me, a short distance away, was a gigantic, monstrous animal, a truly monstrous thing. Never in my wildest fantasies of fiction had I encountered anything like it. I looked at it in complete, uttermost bewilderment. The first thing I really noticed was its size. I thought for some reason that it must be close to 100 feet tall. It seemed to be standing erect, although I could not figure out how it stood. Next, I noticed that it had wings, 2 short, wide wings. At that point, I became aware that I insisted on examining the animal as if it were an ordinary sight. That is, I looked at it. However, I could not really look at it in the way I was accustomed to looking. I realized that I was rather noticing things about it as if the picture were becoming more clear as parts were added. Its body was covered with tufts of black hair. It had a long muzzle and was drooling. Its eyes were bulgy and round, like 2 enormous white balls. Then it began to beat its wings. It was not flapping motion of a bird's wings, but a kind of flickering, vibratory tremor. It gained speed and began circling in front of me. It was not flying, but rather skidding with astounding speed and agility, just a few inches above the ground. For a moment I found myself engrossed in watching it move. I thought that its movements were ugly, and yet its speed and easiness was superb. It circled twice in front of me, vibrating its wings, and whatever was drooling out of its mouth flew in all directions. Then it turned around and skidded away at an incredible speed until it disappeared in the distance. I stared fixedly in the direction it had gone because there was nothing else I could do. I had a most peculiar sensation of being incapable of organizing my thoughts coherently. I could not move away. It was as if I were glued to the spot. Then I saw something like a cloud in the distance. An instant later, the gigantic beast was circling again at full speed in front of me. Its wings cut closer and closer to my eyes until they hit me, and I felt its wings had actually hit whatever part of me was there. I yelled with all my might in the midst of the most excruciating pain I have ever had. The next thing I knew, I was seated on the mat, and Don Juan was rubbing my forehead. He rubbed my arms and legs with leaves. Then he took me to an irrigation ditch behind his house, took off my clothes and submerged me completely, then pulled me out and submerged me over and over again. As I lay on the shallow bottom of the irrigation ditch, Don Juan pulled up my left foot from time to time and tapped the toe gently. After a while, I felt a ticklishness. He noticed it and said that I was all right. I put on my clothes and we returned to his house. I sat down again on my straw mat and tried to talk, but I felt I could not concentrate on what I wanted to say. Although my thoughts were very clear, I was amazed to realize how much concentration was necessary to talk. I also noticed that in order to say something, I had to stop looking at things. I had the impression that I was entangled at a very deep level, and when I wanted to talk, I had to surface like a diver. I had to ascend as if pulled by my words. Twice I went as far as clearing my throat in a fashion which was perfectly ordinary. I could have said then whatever I wanted to, but I did not. I preferred to remain at the strange level of silence where I could just look. I had the feeling that I was beginning to tap what Don Juan had called seeing, and that made me very happy. Afterwards, Don gave me some soup and tortillas and ordered me to eat. I was able to eat without any trouble, without losing what I thought to be my power of seeing. I focused my eyes on everything around me. I was convinced I could see everything, and yet the world looked the same to the best of my assessment. I struggled to see until it was quite dark. Finally, I got tired, lay down, and went to sleep. I woke when Don Juan covered me with a blanket. I had a headache and I was sick to my stomach. After a while, I felt better and slept soundly until the next day. In the morning, I was myself again. I asked Don Juan eagerly, "What happened to me?" Don Juan laughed coyly. "You went to look for the keeper, and of course you found it," he said. "But what was it, Don Juan?" "The guardian, the keeper, the sentry of the other world," Don Juan said factually. I intended to relate to him the details of the portentous and ugly beast, but he disregarded my attempt, saying that my experience was nothing special and that any man could do that. I told him that the guardian had been such a shock to me that I really had not been able to think about it. Don Juan laughed and made fun of what he called an overdramatic bent of my nature. "That thing, whatever it was, hurt me," I said. "It was as real as you and I." "Of course it was real. It caused you pain, didn't it?" As I recollected my experience, I grew more excited. Don Juan told me to calm down. Then he asked me if I had really been afraid of it. He stressed the word "really." I was petrified, I said. Never in my life have I experienced such an awesome fright. Come on, he said, laughing. You're not that afraid. I swear to you, I said with genuine fever, that if I could have moved, I would have run hysterically. He found my statement very funny, and roared with laughter. What was the point of making me see that monstrosity, Don Juan? He became serious and gazed at me. That was the guardian, he said. If you want to see, you must overcome the guardian. But how can I overcome it, Don Juan? It is perhaps 100 feet tall. Don Juan laughed, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Why don't you tell me what I saw, so there won't be any misunderstanding, I said. If that makes you happy, go ahead, tell me. I narrated everything I could remember, but that did not seem to change his mood. Still, that's nothing new, he said, smiling. But how did you expect me to overcome a thing like that? With what? He was silent for quite a while. Then he turned to me and said, You're not afraid, not really. You were hurt, but you were not afraid. He reclined against some bundles and put his arms behind his head. I thought he had dropped the subject. You know, he said suddenly, looking at the roof of the Ramada, every man can see the guardian. And the guardian is sometimes, for some of us, an awesome beast as high as the sky. You're lucky. For you it was only 100 feet tall. And yet, its secret is so simple. He paused for a moment and hummed a Mexican song. The guardian of the other world is a gnat, he said, slowly, as if he were measuring the effect of his words. I beg your pardon? The guardian of the other world is a gnat, he repeated. What you encountered yesterday was a gnat, and that little gnat will keep you away until you overcome it. For a moment I did not want to believe what Don Juan was saying, but upon recollecting the sequence of my vision, I had to admit that at a certain moment I was looking at a gnat, and an instant later a sort of mirage had taken place, and I was looking at the beast. How could a gnat hurt me, Don Juan? I asked, bewildered. It was not a gnat when it hurt you. It was the guardian of the other world. Perhaps someday you will have the courage to overcome it. But not now, though. Now it's 100-foot tall, drooling beast, and there is no point in talking about it. It's no feat to stand in front of it. Let me try that again. It's no feat to stand in front of it. So if you want to know more about it, find the guardian again. 2 days later, on November 11th, I smoked Don Juan's mixture again. I had asked Don Juan to let me smoke once more to find the guardian. I had not asked him on the spur of the moment, but after a long deliberation. My curiosity about the guardian was disproportionately greater than my fear, or the discomfort of losing my clarity. The procedure was the same. Don Juan filled his bowl once, and when I finished the entire contents, he cleansed it and put it away. The effect was markedly slower. When I began to feel a bit dizzy, Don Juan came to me, and holding my head in his hands, helped me to lie down on my left side. He told me to stretch my legs and relax, and then helped me put my right arm in front of my body at the level of my chest. He turned my hand so the palm was pressing against the mat and let my weight rest on it. I did not do anything to help or hinder him, for I did not know what he was doing. He sat in front of me and told me not to be concerned with anything. He said that the guardian was going to come, and that I had a ringside seat to see it. He also told me in a casual way that the guardian could cause great pain, but that there was one way to avert it. He said that 2 days before he had made me sit up when he judged I had had enough. He pointed to my right arm and said that he had deliberately put it in that position so I could use it as a lever to push myself up whenever I wanted to. By the time he had finished telling me all that, my body was quite numb. I wanted to call to his attention the fact that it would be impossible for me to push myself up because I had lost control of my muscles. I tried to vocalize the words, but I could not. He seemed to have anticipated me, however, and explained that the trick was in the will. He urged me to remember the time years before when I first smoked the mushrooms. On that occasion, I had fallen to the ground and sprung up to my feet again by an act of what he had called, at that time, my will. I had thought myself up, he said, and that was in fact the only possible way to get up. He was saying, what he was saying was useless to me because I did not remember what I had really done years before. I had an overwhelming sense of despair and closed my eyes. Don Juan grabbed me by the hair, shook my head vigorously, and ordered me imperatively not to lose my eyes. I not only opened my eyes, but I did something I thought was astonishing. I actually said, "I don't know how I got up that time." I was startled. There was something very monotonous about the rhythm of my voice, but it was plainly my voice, and yet I honestly believed I could not have said that, because a minute before I had been incapable of speaking. I looked at Don Juan. He turned his face to one side and laughed. "I didn't say that," I said, and again I was startled by my voice. I felt elated. Speaking under these conditions became an exhilarating process. I wanted to ask Don Juan to explain my talking, but I found I was again incapable of uttering one single word. I was struggling fiercely to voice my thoughts, but it was useless. I gave up, and at that moment, almost involuntarily, I said, "Who's talking? Who's talking?" That question made Don Juan laugh so hard that at one point he bobbed on his side. Apparently, it was possible for me to say simple things as long as I knew exactly what I wanted to say. "Am I talking? Am I talking?" I asked. Don Juan told me that if I did not stop horsing around, he was going to go out and lie down under the ramada and leave me alone to my clowning. "It's not clowning," I said. I was very serious about it. My thoughts were very clear. My body, however, was numb. I did not feel it. I was not suffocated. I had once been in the past under similar conditions, I was comfortable because I did not feel anything. I had no control whatever over my voluntary system, and yet I could talk. The thought occurred to me that I could talk. The thought occurred to me, if I could talk, I could probably stand up as Don Juan had said. "Up," I said in English. In a flicker of an eye, I was up. Don Juan shook his head in disbelief and walked out of the house. "Don Juan," I called out 3 times. He came back. "Put me down," I said. "Put yourself down," he said. "You seem to be doing very well." I said down, and suddenly I lost sight of the room, and I could not see anything. After a moment, the room and Don Juan came back into my field of vision. I thought that I must have lain down with my face to the ground, and he had grabbed me by my hair and lifted my head. "Thank you," I said with a very slow monotone. "You are welcome," he said. He replied, mocking my tone of voice, and had another attack of laughter. Then he took some leaves and began rubbing my arms and feet with them. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm rubbing you," he said, imitating my painful monotone. His body convulsed with laughter. His eyes were shiny and very friendly. I liked him. I felt that Don Juan was compassionate and fair and funny. I could not laugh with him, but I would have liked to. Another feeling of exhilaration invaded me, and I laughed. It was such an awful sound that Don Juan was taken aback for an instant. "I better take you to that bitch," he said, "or you're going to kill yourself clowning." He put me up on my feet and made me walk around the room. Little by little, I began to feel my feet and my legs, and finally my entire body. My ears were bursting with a strange pressure. It was like the sensation of a leg or an arm that has fallen asleep. I felt a tremendous weight on the back of my neck and under the scalp and the top of my head. Don Juan rushed me to the irrigation ditch at the back of the house. He dumped me there fully clothed. The cold water reduced the pressure and the pain by degrees until it was all gone. I changed my clothes in the house and sat down, and I again felt the same kind of aloofness, the same desire to stay quiet. I noticed this time, however, that it was not clarity of mind or a power to focus. Rather, it was a sort of melancholy and a physical fatigue. Finally, I fell asleep. November 12, 1968. This morning, Don Juan and I went to the nearby hills to collect plants. We walked about 6 miles on extremely rough terrain. I became very tired. We sat down to rest. After my initiative, and he began a conversation saying that he was pleased with my progress. I know now that it was I who talked, I said, but at the time I could have sworn it was someone else. It was you, of course, he said. How come I couldn't recognize myself? That's what the little smoke does. One can talk and not notice it. One can move thousands of miles and not notice that either. But that's also how one can go through things. The little smoke removes the body, and one is free. Like the wind, better than the wind. The wind can be stopped by a rock or a wall or a mountain. The little smoke makes one as free as the air, perhaps even freer. The air can be locked in a tomb and become stale. But with the aid of the little smoke, one cannot be stopped or locked in. Don Juan's words released a mixture of euphoria and doubt. I felt an overwhelming uneasiness, a sensation of undefined guilt. Then one can really do all those things, Don Juan? What do you think? Would you rather think you're crazy? You would rather think you're crazy, wouldn't you? He said cuttingly. Well, it's easy for you to accept all these things. For me, it's impossible. It's not easy for me. I don't have any more privileges than you. Those things are equally hard for you or for me or for anyone else to accept. But you are at home with all this, Don Juan. Yes, but it cost me plenty. I had to struggle, perhaps more than you ever will. You have a baffling way of getting everything to work for you. You have no idea how hard I had to toil to do what you did yesterday. You have something that helps you every inch of the way. There is no other way to explain for the manner in which you learn about the powers. You did it before with Mescalito, now you have done it with the little smoke. You should concentrate on the fact that you have a great gift and leave other considerations to the side. You make it sound so easy, but it isn't. I'm torn inside. You will be in one piece again soon enough. You have not taken care of your body, for one thing. You are too fat. I didn't want to say anything to you before. You must always let others do what they have to do. Let me get that. One must always let others do what they have to do. You were away for years. I told you that you would come back, though, and you did. The same thing happened to me. I quit for 5.5 years. Why did you stay away, Don Juan? For the same reason you did. I didn't like it. Why did you come back? For the same reason you have come back yourself. Because there is no other way to live. That statement had a great impact on me, for I had found myself thinking that perhaps there was no other way to live. I had never voiced this thought to anyone yet. Yet Don Juan had surmised it correctly. After a very long silence, I asked him, "What did I do yesterday, Don Juan?" "You got up when you wanted to, but I didn't know how I did that. It takes time to perfect that technique. The important thing, however, is that you know how to do it." "But I don't. That's the point. I really don't." "Of course you do. Don Juan, I assure you, I swear to you." But he did not let me finish. He got up and walked away. Later on, we talked again about the guardian of the other world. "If I believe that whatever I experienced is actually real," I said, "then the guardian is a gigantic creature that can cause unbelievable physical pain, and And if I believe that one can actually travel enormous distances by an act of will, then it is logical to conclude that I could also will the monster to disappear. Is that correct? Not exactly, he said. You can will the guardian to disappear. You cannot will the guardian to disappear. You can will, your will can stop it from harming you, though. Of course, if you ever accomplish that, the road is open to you. You can actually go by the guardian, and there is nothing it can do, not even whirl around madly. How can I accomplish that? You already know. All you need now is to practice. I told you that you were having a misunderstanding that stemmed from our differences in perceiving the world. I said that for me to know something meant that I had to be fully aware of what I was doing, and that I could repeat what I knew at will. But in this case, I was neither aware of what I had done under the influence of the smoke, nor could I repeat it if my life depended on it. Don Juan looked at me inquisitively. He seemed to be amused by what I was saying. He took off his hat and scratched his temples as he does when he wants to pretend bewilderment. You really know how to talk and say nothing, don't you? He said, laughing. I have told you that you have to have an unbending intent in order to become a man of knowledge. But you seem to have an unbending intent to confuse yourself with riddles. You insist on explaining everything as if the whole world were composed of things that can be explained. Now you are confronted with the guardian and with the problem of moving by using your will. Has it ever occurred to you that only a few things in this world can be explained your way? When I say that, the guardian is really blocking your passing and could actually knock the devil out of you. I know what I mean. When I say that one can move by one's will, I also know what I mean. I wanted to teach you, little by little, how to move. But then I realized that you know how to do it, even though you say you don't. But I really don't know how, I protested. You do, you fool, he said sternly, and then smiled. It reminds me of the time when someone put that kid Julio on a harvesting machine. He knew how to run it, although he had never done it before. I know what you mean, Don Juan, however. I still feel that I could not do it again because I am not sure of what I did. A phony sorcerer tries to explain everything in the world with explanations he is not sure about, he said. And so everything is witchcraft. But then, you're no better. You also want to explain everything your way, but you're not sure of your explanations either. End of chapter.